2023 was a great year to be a Nintendo fan. I played a lot of games that I found so much enjoyment in, and today I wanted to share what those games were. I mean, while I'm at it, I figured I'd rank them in a tier list because, tier lists are always fun, right? As always, these tend to be very subjective and relative to my personal experiences. So if you disagree, then that is totally fine, as we all have our own preferences. It just makes discussion more fun. Also, I will not be including multiplayer games as those are harder to rank, as you don't really beat them necessarily. Just thought I'd mention that, but anywho, let's get started. To begin, I'm going to go over some games that I merely replayed through in 2023. While I've beaten them before, having played them through recently, I figured I might as well add them here. So first up, we have the original WarioWare. I will always take an excuse to replay this little gem, and this past year it came out on the NSO GBA library, so I had to quickly beat it again. It's very short, but just simple fun. There's never a time where I'm not down for some good old microgame madness. I think at this point I've beaten it everywhere where it's been available. It's really just a fun time and a great way to dive into the series. Even so, I might just put it in B tier, because there's not a lot to it, especially compared to other games on this list. But with that said, I mean, it's still pretty good. I would recommend it, especially if you haven't played these games before. They're very good. Next is the only Pokemon game on the list, being Pokémon SoulSilver. It shows both of them, but I played through SoulSilver. But before I get to that, you may have noticed that I also may have omitted the Scarlet Violet DLC. I want to get this out of the way because I'm simply not a fan of how low quality the new games are. Even though Gen 9 had some great aspects to it, it in my opinion is not a game that should have been shipped out looking like this or this. So until further notice, I'm simply just not touching anything Pokemon related that comes out in modern day. You're better off playing the new Pal World game because even though it has its own problems, at least the gameplay and the graphical output is actually acceptable for modern standards. Maybe I should do a video talking about my problems with Pokemon, but anyways, enough of that. I gotta get back on track. Pokemon SoulSilver is a solid game. Nothing spectacular though. I will say I enjoy the Pokemon following you in the overworld. I think the gameplay is obviously very good, especially since it's post Gen 3, so the physical special split is a thing, and that helps so many mons. My issue lies in the pacing. It's kinda bad. You fight one gym leader who has their ace at level 35, and then the next gym leader will probably have theirs at level 34. Like, the level scaling is just not it. It just makes the game too easy, but it also doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room as you constantly speed through the region. When I replayed this year, I did it with a friend in a Nuzlocke, which was pretty fun. The problem was that these issues became more noticeable under this context. Aside from that, I also find the lack of Gen 2 mons being present as much as Gen 1 mons kinda sad, since this is supposed to be the Johto game. You literally get to go to Kanto too, which is sick as hell by the way, but most of the gym leaders in Johto still use Kanto mons all the same, which is super lame to me. While the game is still good, I'm tempted to just put it in C tier, because it's not really a standout favorite of mine. It's by no means a bad game, but I think everything else on this list I absolutely adore, or just simply think it's better than SoulSilver. The spot for SoulSilver is more so relative to everything else here, if that makes sense. It's not like it's a garbage game or anything, so take that for what you will. Oh boy, I'm excited for these next two. I've always liked the Pikmin games well enough, but I don't know what happened because I absolutely fell in love with these games in 2023, more so than before. Having not played the original two in so very long, I was surprised to see how well they held up. And furthermore, they're just such timeless classics. Pikmin 1 is super short, but that's to its benefit because it's such a great intro to the series and it's also a very replayable title. Your objective in the game is to collect 30 ship parts within 30 in-game days while using these little guys called Pikmin, as the title may suggest. It's such a hard game to explain to people who haven't played it, but trust me when I say there's a reason it should be known as Pikmin. This gameplay is top-notch. The story is also fun. Olimar is just an average Joe working a 9 to 5 to provide for his family, and he just happens to crash on a wild planet with silly plant people and other kooky monsters. Pikmin 1 is certainly an A-tier game. Can't go that much higher because it has such small amount of content, but all things considered, that is still pretty good. Now, Pikmin 2, on the other hand, I absolutely fucking adore this game. The world building is expanded upon as you meet Louis and the president of Olimar's company, and the entry logs give so much personality to the characters as they react to the beings and treasures they come across. This game, as opposed to the other one, focuses more on exploration, as there are these cave systems that you go through and hunt treasure. I know these things are divisive, but I absolutely fucking love them. They are randomized and contain some insanely challenging enemies and obstacles. Some might even borderline be kind of bullshit, but honestly that adds to the fun and chaos of the game. I absolutely love this. I'm not sure if it actually is, but this feels like it would be the sort of thing that inspired Lethal Company, as you traverse through dark rooms simply to locate treasures to repay a company's debt, only to come across crazy monstrosities such as the Water Wraith. It's a weird comparison to make, but I've been playing a lot of that recently, and it's been pretty cool, and I couldn't help but notice that interesting connection. But yeah, seeing as this is one of my favorite games of all time, and, you know, Pikmin, it has to go in S tier. This is one of my favorite games of all time, and I genuinely hope more people get to experience this classic. Definitely an S tier game for me. Ah, okay, another good one. So Banjo-Kazooie being released on the Switch was pretty amazing. I hadn't gotten a proper chance to sit down and play this one all the way through since I was really young, and I used to play a bunch of N64 games with a friend. Back then, games were much simpler and honestly more enjoyable. This game oozes this sort of nostalgic feeling for me, but when I say it is on par, if not better than Mario 64, I assure you, it is not the nostalgia talking. Replaying it as an adult cemented to me that Banjo was truly something special. It had some unique gameplay mechanics and a very zany aesthetic. As a collectathon, it does a good job at enticing players to 100% the game, which is what I did. It's just a charming 3D platforming experience that has really stood the test of time in my opinion. I still think I prefer Mario 64 due to the overall tighter controls, but nonetheless, Banjo-Kazooie lands a spot in A tier. Now, this is a game that I never fully finished back then, as I never really owned it, actually. Now that I played the 3DS port, I can say that I already prefer this version. The original had some unnecessary motion controls, so seeing those gone is nice. Other than that, DKC Returns is a delightful 2D platformer. It's definitely more on the challenging side compared to Mario games, which I think is a nice change of pace. But much like Banjo-Kazooie, I couldn't help but not go and collect all the puzzle pieces as well as the Kong letters. It felt so good to control, and it clearly has its own inventive identity compared to its predecessors. Not a standout favorite of mine, but objectively I find that it is deserving of an A tier as it is just such a well-made game that's just plain fun. Next up is Super Paper Mario, which I was kind of pleasantly surprised to find out that it was as good as it was. It's one of the more recent games I beat, so it's still very fresh in my mind, but what can I say? This game is severely underrated. I know Thousand Year Door is the fan favorite, and honestly, it's still mine too, but this one has so much charm and character as well. The music is very bizarre, but weirdly enthralling. I really enjoy it. This game claims the title for the Mario game with the best story, hands down. The new characters are all amazing. I think they did a great job characterizing them. Even the main squad of Mario, Peach, Bowser, and Luigi are given some great moments to shine. The one thing is that while the gameplay is generally enjoyable, it has some flaws in it that are very relied heavily in these cryptic puzzles that I genuinely don't get how one is supposed to figure out. But generally, there are parts that kind of drag on towards the middle of the game, I'm not gonna lie. But even still, this game has some pretty high highs. I am glad my friend pushed me to play this one. It was really well worth it. I think it shall go in A tier, right above DKC Returns. I personally just liked it a little bit more than DK, but I think DK is objectively better. But again, this is my subjective list, so there you go. So you may think that this is a strange exception to my rule of no multiplayer games, but I'm considering this in the context of playing through the Grand Prix single player. So, was the Mario Kart 8 DLC worth it in the end? Well, yes, of course it was. It literally doubled the course list and reintroduced some desirable characters, and Peachette, into the roster. Even though some of the choices they made for the tracks are questionable, it is still hard to go wrong with more of this incredible Mario Kart experience. As for how to rate this, see, this is the issue. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to be judging this, as it's just the DLC. But if I'm really just basing this on the DLC alone, I think I'll put it in the top of B tier. But MK8 as a whole package is definitely high A or even S tier material. So I just want to let that be known. But we're only ranking the DLC specifically here. Okay, so from this point forward, starting with Super Circuit, I'm looking at games that I hadn't played prior, but they aren't new to 2023. But these are new games to me. I had not experienced them in any way prior to this past year. Okay, so with the GBA Online thing, it prompted me to play some games I never thought I would. One of those being Mario Kart Super Circuit. Along with WarioWare, I quickly played through this one when the software launched. And yeah, I really wasn't having it. I'm well aware that there are people who prefer the older games, and more power to them, but for me, it's really hard to ever go back. This just felt very frustrating to control. The maps are decent, I guess, although most remade versions are just simply better. I could not in good faith recommend going back to this one, and as such, I'm just gonna toss it down in D tier. It's not an awful game, but I know it's probably the worst thing I played this year, so... yeah. Sorry, Mario Kart Super Circuit fans. Speaking of games I thought I'd never play, the GBA Fire Emblem game also came out to the same service. To my surprise, this game holds up quite nicely, with some solid sprite work. As someone who has played Advance Wars, it wasn't too bad for me to get into the gameplay, which is where I'd say it shines the most. Characters come in varying classes, like Cavaliers, Flying Units, and Healers, which all excel at different things. But the catch is that if the units die in a battle, they don't come back. And I don't know, I think that's a pretty sick concept. The story itself is okay, nothing too stand out. Most of the characters don't even have a line of dialogue, so it's hard to even care if they die for sentimental reasons. If they had just gotten that aspect down, I think it could have been so much better. But even as it stands, it's a really solid RPG, and very fun, and I think it deserves an A tier. But after playing that game, I decided to give The Binding Blade a try, which is the sequel. Although technically it's the predecessor, it's just that timeline-wise, this one takes place after this other game, which, I don't know, it's confusing, but just think of it as chronologically it comes after the one I just talked about, so that's how it is. But yeah, this is Roy's game from Smash, and is actually a Japan exclusive. Luckily, much like Mother 3 though, there is a fan translation. This one is more or less the same as the other one in terms of its gameplay and mechanics. I found this one to be much harder though, but that definitely proved to be a fun challenge. It still has some of the same flaws as the other game, but I'd say the story is slightly better, as there are also multiple routes and endings, which is cool. But to keep things simple, I'll just put it one spot above, because I think I liked it more than the other one, but they're borderline pretty similar. I'd try either or, I mean, they're both good. Oh, so Triforce Heroes is certainly a game. Okay, look, I actually think this game is a fire concept. 3-player Zelda dungeons, fun cosmetics and collectibles to work towards, and other multiplayer modes? That sounds fantastic. Except, once you play it, you realize the gameplay is a little repetitive and super linear. Okay, I mean, that's a little harsh, but it just has to be said. There is still a little fun to be had. The different items are fun to use, messing with your friends is also great. I played this last summer with 2 of my buddies, one of them being Sizzle, who made a more in-depth review that I would recommend watching if you're interested in hearing more about this game. But yeah, with all that being said, this game is definitely a C tier, nothing special. Aw man, I really like the Link's Awakening remake. The style is so cute and colorful, and the vibe is super nice too. It's just your classic 2D Zelda adventure, with a nicely condensed world to explore. This was the one with the Mario enemies, which was always a cool thing about the original. Also Kirby's in here, which is really funny to me. The narrative here is not as fleshed out as other Zelda games, but that's clearly not the point. They want to focus on a fun handheld adventure with more of the gameplay at hand first, which I generally respect more personally. For being so charming and overall pleasant to play through, I'll put it in the A tier. Okay, so now we're going to get into the games that actually came out in 2023. So starting with Metroid Prime Remastered, I'm going to start by saying that this is definitely one of the best looking games on the Switch. And I cannot wait to see how they do with Metroid Prime 4, you know, whenever that actually comes out. But anyway, playing through this one was like playing through Super Metroid for the first time, which is not something to take lightly. This is a terrific experience, so much atmosphere here, fun labyrinths to explore, and some genuinely creepy enemies to engage in combat with. The controls feel better than ever, and every boss is very much its own enjoyable challenge. This game truly deserves S tier, it's not even a question. So this is a game that I felt went under the radar. Advance Wars is interesting because it's one of those series that not many people truly know of, but it's on par if not better than Fire Emblem. It's more focused on PvP as opposed to Fire Emblem's longer campaigns, but the thing is, this game has 2 campaigns, and they're both really fun. The strategy here focuses on the constant deployment of units in an effort to overwhelm your foe. But the fun part comes in the commanders you choose, which gives different benefits and hindrances to the varying types of units. I had already played the originals, but this one with the new coat of paint here is really nice, albeit a little inconsistent. The unfortunate thing is that the online multiplayer options are very lacking, and some of the graphical enhancements are more like downgrades in some of people's eyes, including myself. I don't know, what is this? Regardless, it still plays like you'd want it to, and it is a great way for newer players to get into the franchise, which finally got the revival that it deserved. I still think I like Advance Wars more than Fire Emblem as a whole, but it's definitely close. I'll have to check out more Fire Emblem games in the future, but for now, Advance Wars will stay winning. Well, well, well. If it isn't Game of the Year nominee, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom had a lot of shoes to fill with its predecessor being the 2017 Game of the Year winner, Breath of the Wild. And a game that I hold in very high regard, I might add. So, was the sequel worth the wait? Well, yeah, it was pretty good. The thing is that it was more of the same game, really, with just some new mechanics introduced. Building with the Ultra Hand was fun to mess with, the Sky Islands and Underground were cool additions, even though I personally didn't find much to do there in either. The story was a story. Look, the game has more notable weak points, I will admit, but the fact is that it is still an amazing game to play through. I think because Breath of the Wild already did the whole open world thing, the second time around didn't hit as hard. But that's okay. It's not a copy-paste or anything like that. It has its own merits for sure. So, with that said, I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is still an excellent game with lots to do in it. I mean, I beat the game and I still have so many side quests and other different things that I can do in the game if I ever wanted to. So just for that alone, I mean, it should just go in S tier. And like I said, it was very good. And I did have a blast playing through it, so it's justified. Oh yeah, Pikmin 4, baby! I have been anticipating this game for a very long time, and the outcome did not disappoint. Ochi is so much fun to use, the caves from Pikmin 2 are back, the art style is absolutely gorgeous. It notably has such a longer campaign and lots of other little things to work towards on the side. The Andori battles are fun. The nighttime missions are also really cool with the little glowy Pikmin. This game is just peak, man. I fucking love Pikmin so much. This series is just everything I want in a game. Fun and satisfying gameplay, while also being very challenging. Vibrant, cartoony art style. I mean, the Pikmin themselves, they are just such cute little guys. They're the greatest. Holy shit, I can go on and on about this game. It's not even up for debate. It's easily number 1 on my list. Nothing comes close, for sure. Well, except Pikmin 2, which is my real favorite one. But because Pikmin 4 was actually new this year, I'll give it the dub this time. Oh, okay. Well, good riddance to the New Soup series, because I was getting really tired of the sterile New Super Mario Bros. Style games. So when I first saw the Mario Bros. Wonder trailer, I was very excited. It looked so wacky and different. And after playing it, I can confirm that it was in fact wacky and different. I found the Wonder Flower gimmicks to be very fun to play through, and the majority of the level themes are very unique as well. My one major gripe is the lack of bosses. I mean, you really only fight Bowser Jr., and even then, you don't really fight any bosses in some worlds, they just don't have one. I found that to be kind of cringe, honestly. Still though, the aesthetic alone outshines any of the new Super Mario Bros. Games by a landslide. Those games just had no identity, as fun as they were. This is just a great Mario game, which is hard to go wrong with, but that being said, I actually think I like DKC a bit more, but that's really nothing to be ashamed of. Okay, so next is the latest WarioWare game, WarioWare Move It. This one brings back the motion control minigames from the Wii installment. These are very fun and creative. I enjoyed them a lot. As with most WarioWare games, there wasn't a lot in terms of content. However, this one brings back some of the fun multiplayer modes from the GameCube game. It's very fun and silly as you'd expect, but the shortage of extra content does hinder it a bit. I think I like it a good bit more than Get It Together, but even then I will put this right under the original WarioWare, because that one is just an instant classic. Last but certainly not least, we have the Mario RPG remake. Prior to the remake, I had never played Mario RPG, and boy did I miss out. This game is delightful and charming. I'm just running out of adjectives to use because I played so many whimsical games this year, but yeah, definitely delightful and charming. The story, while not as amazing as Super Paper Mario's, is still fun and filled with hilarious moments in between. I think the gameplay at its core is extremely fun. This has some of the most satisfying RPG elements that are primarily tied to the timing of buttons when landing or dodging attacks. The chain mechanic incentivizes precise inputs, which are fun and rewarding to pull off. Between this and Super Paper Mario, I think I like RPG more due to the gameplay alone. While the story doesn't compare, it still had some very memorable interactions with all the unique characters here. Also, while playing it, I definitely got a lot of Earthbound vibes, so that's just a plus in my book. So yeah, that's my list for the games I played in 2023. And I know we're 1 month into 2024. However, I wanted to finish up Mario RPG, which I started in 2023, and I finally got around to it the other night. A goal of mine is to beat as many Nintendo games as I can, and this past year I managed to get a lot done. I delved into some new series, revisited some classics, and managed to play a majority of the new releases that came out. It was really fun and satisfying to get done. Please feel free to comment down below any game suggestions you may have, and maybe I'll play them this year. I tend to focus on Nintendo games, as you can probably tell, but I'm not opposed to other stuff as long as it's not terribly long. Also, let me know what your favorite games you played in 2023 were. I'd love to hear it. With all that said, I thank you all for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe as it does help out as I continue my YouTube journey. Other than that, I hope you have a great day.